Cool. How many of you had first time at Oak Forest? Yeah, isn't this place amazing? Yeah, I really like coming up here. So, well, cool. My name is Jordan Anderson. I am talking about emotions in the Psalms. And was that a tiny clap? So I'm really excited. A little bit about no, press it harder. No, all right, we're gonna do that. A little bit about me. This is my family. This is Emily on the left. She looks familiar because she's in off-road and she's sitting right there. And then the larger of the two kiddos, that's Ellie. She's 5, and then McKenna is 3. What is happening?
It's you, not me.
It's the beard. Also, all right, hold on.
You got this.
Hi guys, my name is Jordan Anderson. No, I'm happy to be here. This is my family. Also about me, you should know I work at Hope. And so I have a few different hats that I wear. I get to be a part of team small groups with Kaylin and Natty and Emily Severson. So I love that. I'm also the building maintenance manager.
Yeah.
I fix things, and I get to do a lot of project management. And then I'm also part of the worship staff with Colin Mullaney. And so a lot of variety, but I love it. Also, you might be thinking, why might I be qualified to teach on the Psalms and emotions? And my response to that hypothetical question is that I think we're all qualified to be able to speak about Scripture and emotions, because I firmly believe, after studying this, that we are all emotional. Now, some of you might kind of bristle at that. You know, all you T's on the Myers-Briggs is like, emotions, never. So there's two kinds of people when it comes to emotions. Before we get to that, I want to just quick aside, and this was something that God really revealed to me in my own study and preparation for this, is that can we just take a moment and just kind of sit with the reality that in our Holy Scriptures, there exists a collection of writings and songs and poems that deal directly with the idea of significant sorrow and pain and doubt and struggle back to the God that authored and ordained those scriptures to be in our holy book. Like, somehow in God's divine wisdom, he said, you know what my people need in this holy text that reveals who I am and my plan for my creation is a collection of writings that deal directly with my creation that is going to doubt and struggle with who I am. Somehow God said, you know what they need? They need that. I know of no other mainline religion or non-mainline religion that has something like that, has a dynamic like that within their holy text. So I just thought that was really cool. That ministered to me as I was preparing for this. So, all right, back at it. Two kinds of people. Specifically, two kinds of people on a road trip of emotions. This is the metaphor that I'm going to run with. There's those that by nature or nurture have taken their emotions and have said, whoops, okay, have said, nope, I don't want anything to do with you. I don't trust you. I don't trust where you lead in decisions. I don't like the way that you assist me or others in interpreting and processing the world around them. And so they are in the trunk. okay, within this emotional road trip. Okay, others, as you would then expect, if we're on the spectrum, are like, emotions are in the driver's seat, right? It's like they're in, full control, either willingly or maybe sometimes unwillingly. They do control a lot of how we interpret and how we process through the world. And if pushed to the extreme, they actually assist us in misinterpreting and misinforming the way that we look at the world, right? So, again, no one likes to be put in boxes, but this is a spectrum that I see as I talk to people and as I read and I research. Most folks would fall on one spectrum or the other. I mean, Myers-Briggs does this, right? You're either a thinker or a feeler, and a lot of times that's interpreted as non-emotional or very emotional, okay? For the record, I am an F on the Myers-Briggs, okay? So, go big feel, okay? The Psalms, though, offer a different approach. The Psalms, I firmly believe, allow us to say, in the same breath, we are to recognize our emotions and to even say, you know what? Those emotional responses are valid based on the circumstances and experiences we are undergoing, but they're not in control. They don't get to be in control because in the whole of Scripture, who gets to be in control of our lives? God does. Okay. So the Psalms are going to offer maybe this third approach, this different way to say emotions, yes, validated and very real. Okay, and for those of you that are kind of on this spectrum, you need to hear this. And for those that are maybe over here, it's like emotional, emotions tend to be in control and whatnot. You need to hear that emotions aren't meant to control your life. God is. And so, this is the other point. Our emotions are always meant to be direction. If somebody were to ask you, what do emotions do? Just kind of sit with that question. What do emotions do? I would say emotions are a response, either chemically within our brain or however you want to interpret that, a response that's always meant to be directional back to God because He is the only one that can offer true processing, true understanding of what those emotions actually mean, how we should interpret them. And so this is my thesis, just to get it out of the way. The Psalms teach us how to pray through our emotions, directing them back to God, the one who can offer true interpretation and processing. So that's where we're going today. That is hopefully where we're going to land. Now, when I talk of Psalms, I think a lot of times we try to use Scripture like an encyclopedia. Okay, I am experiencing or going through X, therefore I'm going to try to find a specific verse or specific section of Scripture that speaks to that. Okay, that's what we do with an encyclopedia. I want to learn about tigers. I go find T. Okay, or now Wikipedia. I just type it in, right? Okay, but before, like the actual book, encyclopedia, I would go find the T and go TI, okay? That's not necessarily how Scripture is meant to be. We're meant to look at the whole of Scripture, specifically the whole of Psalms. There's not a specific architectural blueprint that we can follow when it comes to understanding how we should process through our emotions. But I think there are some patterns, and I want to highlight some of these today for us. So I think they're going to be helpful. First, Psalms are poetry. When we talk about different genres within Scripture, Psalms by and large, are going to fall within this poetic genre. And all that means is we're going to approach it a little bit differently. Okay, we know how to do this in our day-to-day life. If we're reading a biography of Abraham Lincoln, we don't approach that the same way as we would a poem by Robert Frost or Ernest Hemingway. We also wouldn't approach it the same way that we might different song lyrics. Okay, even our own hymns. Okay. The original hymn, And Can It Be? Okay, we have our own version at Hope, but okay, listen to these words and sit with them. Long I imprisoned and spirit lay, fast bound in sin and nature's night. Mine eye diffused a quickening ray. Behold, the dungeon flamed with light. My chains fell off, my heart set free. I rose, went forth, and followed thee. We don't approach those same words as we would reading the New York Times, right? Okay? Same is absolutely true with the Psalms. And so as you approach the Psalms, approach them as you would a poem. Okay? And what are we looking for in poems? More often than not, imagery. Okay? Specifically, when humans try their best to describe an experience, or more specifically describe how I feel about an experience, we use metaphor. We use imagery. Okay? And sometimes very stark imagery. Okay? Let's dive into an example here. Oh, I died again. All right. Psalm 69, 1 through 4. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in the miry depths, where there is no foothold. I have come into the deep waters. The floods engulf me. I am worn out, calling for help. My throat is parched. My eyes fail, looking for my God. Those who hate me without reason outnumber the hairs of my head. Many are my enemies without cause. Those who seek to destroy me, I am forced to restore what I did not steal. Okay, so what's going on? Is he actually drowning? Probably. Okay, probably not. Okay, is he going blind at the same time that he is drowning? Okay, those who hate me without reason, also probably not true. Okay, outnumber the hairs of my head. I did a quick Google search. There's over 100,000 hairs on average on a human head. Okay, so while he's drowning, while he's going blind, there's 100,000 enemies going after him and him alone. Should we read that literally?
No. No.
At very least, probably not, right? Okay, but it's imagery. And what is this guy telling you? He could have easily just said, I am sad, you are trying to kill me. Like, information transfer, that's the same thing, right? Okay, what does this do? It uses imagery and metaphor to not only describe what's happening, but to describe how it feels when it's happening. Okay? He is using his emotions to process through his experience. Does everyone see that? Okay. All right, let's keep going. The Psalms assume God already knows what he's doing. This is what I mean by this. We have a slightly different assumption, I think. I think a lot of us probably assume that God already knows what's happening. Okay? How many of our prayers start off with, it's like, God, you already know, and so we just pray for. Okay? I know mine do. Okay? And so we kind of assume God already knows what's happening. the description of what's happening, and so we're just praying for the relief valve to trigger. The Psalms, okay, and that's not a bad way to pray, okay? The Psalms offer a different approach. There's already an assumption that God knows what he's doing. God is always in control. God is always sovereign. Okay? Let's take a look at a very well-known Psalm, Psalm 23. Pay attention to how God is described. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. I'm provided for. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you, God, are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. Okay, let's stop right here. Within this image, what is the psalmist? A sheep. Okay? And God is a shepherd. Okay? Don't get too excited now. All right? Okay? God is the shepherd. God is before his sheep. And notice, God is always the one in charge, always the one leading, including verse 4. Because God is still described as the shepherd image. Your rod and your staff, tools of a shepherd, they comfort me. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Assuming God has probably led that sheep into the darkest valley. Okay? Now verse 5, the image switches. And we need to do a good job of making sure that we follow the imagery. You, God, prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. I'm fully supplied. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The image switches, right? We're no longer sheep. We're now all of a sudden sitting at like a banquet table. Okay? And who is the servant? God. God is. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. God is still there. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. So even though I am sitting at a table and I'm surrounded by enemies, somehow I am the anointed one, and I am the one that has everything that I need. God never ceases to be in control. And the Psalms, throughout, Psalm after Psalm, has this assumption. God is always in control. Okay? And what he seems to be most concerned about is the psalmist taking time to describe the situation around them at length. Which is, okay, to be fair, which is very different than how I approach my own prayer life. Okay? Psalm after psalm after psalm, it's the description of what is happening and how I'm processing through it. That is the psalmist's assumption. God already knows what he's doing, and he seems to be chiefly concerned with my description of what's happening and how I'm processing through it. That's a difference that we see in the Psalms. Now, something also that I found really interesting. Psalmists often describe their situation at length, while supplication, okay, asking for stuff, okay, it's quite limited in comparison. And unfortunately, we don't have time, but Psalm 22, I highly recommend you all work through that psalm. I know Paul talked about it earlier as well. I think Paul did. And Don, great. Okay, work through that psalm and look at all the descriptors that psalmist is using, and then compare it with what he's actually asking for. It is significantly minimal what he's asking for. And in fact, it's not necessarily even like a specific thing. It's like, God, show me your mercy. That's it. I get like broad categories. So I thought that was a really interesting pattern. Another one, specifically within the Psalms of Lament, the psalmists almost always return back to God in their laments. Now, there are a couple exceptions, and if you wants to know them, we can get that for you. But as the psalmists lament, and they take time to process and to dive deep into their sorrow, into their pain, into their suffering, almost always, right at the end of the psalm, there's a turn. There's a returning back, but God. I think for a lot of us, this pattern is striking because I think for a lot of us, we like to just sit in our frustrations. We just like to kind of like wallow, self-pity party, a little bit. Okay? And I think we do that because, one, we oftentimes don't see a way out. And so we just start predicting the future. We start to say like, all right, if I'm experiencing this sorrow, this pain, this suffering, therefore, and we fill in that blank. I think a lot of us do this. I do this. Okay? The psalmists teach us a different pattern. Okay? Psalm 13. Very short. Look at this. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God, give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I've overcome him. And my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. Do you see that turn? Okay. Again, in almost every single lament psalm, there's this turn. How often are we turning back to God when we are experiencing suffering, when we're experiencing pain? Another pattern, the psalmists consistently have a view of God that is deeply personal and thoroughly sovereign. And what's important about this is if these are held tightly, close-fisted, the psalmists seem to have full freedom to then complain and urge God to action, saying, this is what's happening, this sucks, but you know what you're doing. Thy will be done. And they seem to only be able to say that because these two things are held so tightly. Another pattern, the psalmists consistently have a view of God as creator. The wonderful creation psalms, the heavens declare your glory, O God. But specifically, even in the Psalms of Lament, God is still creator. And now, this is where I want to land the plane, because we're running short on time. I think this one is so very important, that as we consider reading through the Psalms and processing our own grief and our own emotions, is that if we have emotions, and we are created in the image of God, what does that say about God? The only entity, the only person that we can fully run to with our emotions is God. Because he is the one that created them. God is the truly emotional one. And he exhibits them all collectively, perfectly, in balance, all the time. What's even better is God sent his son, Jesus, to be fully God, fully man, to then experience what it's like to be a man within these emotional confines, right? And yet in Hebrews it says, we do not have a high priest who does not sympathize. I'm getting it wrong. Empathize? Is it empathize?
We'll sympathize.
Greek. Okay? Jesus knows. And he can sympathize and empathize. There you go. Okay? Okay, with our woes, with our sorrows. Okay? Because within creation, everything is held together. And so we can bear God's image in our emotions. And we can do that well by the power of the Spirit. Okay? Short on time, I think. But this is funny. So, who knows this book? Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus. Okay, I love this book. Okay, the premise is a bus driver, gets off the bus and then starts talking to you, the reader, and says, "Whatever happens, don't let the pigeon drive the bus." Okay, and I think this is an apt metaphor for emotions because throughout the book, the pigeon starts trying to convince you, the reader, "Hey, just let me drive the bus. They'll give you $5. My Uncle Herb is a bus driver. I know what I'm doing. Just around the block." Okay? So within this metaphor, the pigeon starts really trying to convince you. And again, for those of you on this spectrum, hard line, like, I'm not going to let the pigeon drive the bus, right? Okay? What happens when this happens? Pigeon starts screaming at you. "Let me drive the bus!" Okay? Okay? And finally it was like, all right, whatever. Insurance will take cover or whatever. Okay. But I think because we can bear God's image with our emotions, we can look to him and say, "God, I'm experiencing this emotional response," or "I don't think I'm experiencing the emotional response I should be. How can I bear your image better?" So, a couple of discussion application questions for us. Just observationally, where do you fall in the spectrum of emotional awareness and expression? Are your emotions in the driver's seat, or are they stuffed in the trunk, or somewhere in between? What's the primary emotion you feel towards God right now? And how is that affecting your relationship with him? And then in light of your emotions, in consideration of your emotions, how can you draw near to God more this year? I'll leave these up, and I'll stick around for questions. So.